In the early days of the unrest, people in Iran began to leave. Gradually, this turned into a mass exodus from different parts of the country. Some took buses to the border, others used their own vehicles, and there were those who simply walked just to get out of the country. At the Armenian border, you can see the continuous arrival of people, tired and carrying only what they can, all with the same reason: to survive. Inside Tehran, the situation looks different because there are long lines of vehicles stretching for several miles. There are broken windows on the streets. Smoke can be seen in different parts of the city, and the sound of explosions is almost non-stop. This is no longer normal life, so more people are leaving. But before we continue, please like this video. This means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much. Major cities like Tehran, Isfahan, and Tabriz have become centers of departure, where every day thousands of vehicles head to the northern part of the country because everyone wants to get away from the chaos. According to the data, in just the first 2 days of the war, more than 100,000 people immediately left Tehran, a city with a population of 14 million. And as time goes by, even more people are leaving. Those who have the means to leave the country are heading straight to borders like Turkey and Azerbaijan. In just 10 days, thousands of Iranians crossed the Turkish border, some driving vehicles and others on foot. At the Astara border of Azerbaijan, the flow of people is also continuous, crowded, and the arrivals never stop. Some even pass through Azerbaijan to reach Armenia, even if the route is longer, as long as they can get out. On March 12, 2026, there was a report that most people were just looking for a safe place. Inside the country, an estimated 3.2 million people left Tehran and other major cities for the north and the provinces. They are going to the mountains, to rural areas, and to places far from the center of the chaos. But even there, safety is still not guaranteed. As the number of people leaving increases, it becomes clearer that this could lead to a major humanitarian crisis, because this is no longer just about evacuation, but the collapse of normal life. Tehran, which was once a noisy and busy city with 14 million people, has now become the center of the crisis. Many people are hiding in various places such as remote villages in the mountains of Zanjan, in the farms near Kazvin, the Alborz Mountains, and on the coast of the Caspian Sea, where they hope they will be safer. But this kind of scene is nothing new in Iran. This already happened in 1979 during the Iranian Revolution, where it also started with people leaving gradually until it became widespread. And now it seems like history is just repeating itself, but this time it's faster, more chaotic, and more dangerous. In 1979, around 3 million people left Iran, which was already a lot, but what's happening now is even worse. In the current situation, it's estimated that about 20 to 30% of all of Tehran is almost gone, meaning millions have already left the city. You can see this right on the streets where there's heavy traffic, long lines at gas stations, and a continuous convoy of vehicles heading north. This is no longer a normal departure. According to estimates, about 50 to 60% of those who evacuated are actually from Tehran. And if the fighting gets even worse, the total number of evacuees could possibly reach 5 to 7 million. According to the UNHCR, this is not the end yet, and the number could still increase as the conflict continues. But there's something even more surprising. It's not just ordinary citizens who are leaving, but also government supporters. Supporters of the regime, now even they are leaving. It's no longer because of politics, but because of fear and uncertainty. One of the biggest reasons for this panic is what happened to the new leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. According to reports, he was injured within just the first 24 hours after taking office, and some say he is already dead. Others say he is in a coma. The official statement from the government is that he is a janbas, or wounded. But the problem is he hasn't been seen. Before, the supreme leaders would appear on TV, speak directly to the people, give assurance, and show control. But now, there's nothing. On March 12, he released his first statement, but he didn't appear, and only a letter was released. This is the first time this has happened. And instead of giving confidence, it only made the fear worse. The situation remains dangerous, and the trouble isn't over. Second, people are losing trust. Even those who are loyal are starting to have doubts. Because if the leader himself can't show up, it causes even more fear among ordinary citizens. For many, Mujtaba is the regime's last hope. But now it seems that's gone too. That's why more and more people are leaving quickly. This is no longer just a simple precaution. This is running away from a government that is slowly losing control. And as trust collapses, more people want to leave. Because at this point, it's no longer clear who holds the power. It's like the government keeps moving but has lost its direction. And as missiles continue to fall from the sky, that's not the only reason why the population is dwindling inside Iran. There's a deeper problem. Something is happening within the government itself, and as the situation worsens, the normal flow of daily life inside Iran is also gradually disappearing. Businesses are closing because there's no more supply and there aren't enough people left to work. Factories are stopping because there's not enough electricity, and transportation is struggling to deliver raw materials. Even hospitals are struggling because of a lack of medicine and supplies, and schools are being forced to close because they're no longer safe for students. In many cities, you can see unusual changes. The roads that used to be full of vehicles are now almost empty. The stores are closed. The buildings are vacant. It's not because the situation is peaceful, but because there are hardly any people left. But on the other hand, in the provinces and more remote areas, the opposite is happening. Suddenly, the number of people increased, and places that didn't use to have a large population became crowded. Because of this, basic necessities are starting to run short. Water is becoming limited. Food runs out quickly. Hospitals fill up quickly and can no longer accommodate everyone who is sick or injured. And as time goes by, it's not just the evacuees who are struggling, but also the locals who have long lived in those areas. This is where another problem begins, one that is quieter but serious. Tension arises between people not because they want it, but because they all lack something. When food is scarce, competition happens. When water is scarce, conflicts arise. And when help is lacking, the blame game begins. The situation is gradually becoming more difficult, even in places that used to be safe. While this is happening within the country, people no longer expect things to return to the way they were. They are no longer waiting for a clear solution. All they do now is whatever can help to survive. Those who have the means leave. Those who don't look for ways to last somehow. In this situation, every day is just about survival. And this is where an even bigger problem comes out. The strength of the military is no longer enough. Technology is no longer enough. What is truly being tested is whether a country can still take care of its own people. At this point, it's clear that governance is struggling. Resources are lacking. Control is lacking. And the ability to restore order in the country is lacking. This isn't a sudden collapse that happens in just one day. This is happening gradually. Every day something is lost, something is destroyed, and someone leaves. Until the point comes when things can no longer be restored to how they were. And as this continues to happen, one thing becomes clearer. The hardest battle is not against the enemy outside, but against your own weakness within. And in this kind of battle, there is no quick solution. There is no single action that can fix everything. It takes time, it takes resources, and it takes the trust of the people. But in the current situation, that's what's most lacking. And as trust continues to disappear, and as people continue to leave, a reality that's hard to accept draws even closer. That a country is not only destroyed by war, but also because it gradually loses its ability to stand on its own feet. Behind all of this, there is a quieter but more dangerous enemy. Not missiles or bombs, but a problem that has been there for a long time. the gradual collapse of Iran's environment and resources. Because of severe drought, improper farming methods, and poor management, the main sources of water are gradually drying up. Even before the war started, Tehran's water reserves had already dropped by almost 45%. This means that even before any conflict, people were already struggling every day. There was already a shortage of water. In the past, people used to move toward the city because they were leaving the provinces to look for a better life in urban areas. But now, the opposite is happening because people are leaving the city not just because of the war, but also because there are no longer enough resources like water, food, and other basic needs. That's why millions are heading north to places that are colder and have a greater chance of having water. But even the so-called safe zones are already overcrowded because they've long reached their limits. And now, with so many people arriving, they're also gradually struggling. The rural areas that used to be quiet are now having their own problems because people are becoming crowded, and there's a shortage of food, water, and the services needed to survive. If this situation continues, something worse could happen. It is estimated that the number of displaced people could reach 10 million, which means almost 15% of the entire population of Iran. This is no longer a simple problem of one country. It will become a crisis for the entire region. Because if this many people leave all at once, neighboring countries will be affected. The humanitarian systems will struggle. Aid will be insufficient, and resources will run short. And this is where the most important question comes in. Can Iran still control this? Honestly, it's almost impossible because war isn't their only problem. There's an even deeper issue inside. The country's governance itself has long had weaknesses. The economy has been struggling for a long time. Because of sanctions, high inflation, and poor governance, they've gradually lost allies. The government's ability to support its people has weakened. The value of their currency, the rial, has dropped significantly compared to the dollar. The government almost has no funds left. In other words, even without war, they're already struggling. But now there's a war, there's also an internal crisis, there are also environmental problems. And all of these are getting worse at the same time. In this situation, one thing is clear. The government no longer has enough money to help its own people. The billions of dollars needed for shelter, food, and health support for the millions who have fled are not in Iran's treasury. And this is where the situation gets even worse. Because aside from the war, there is another long-standing problem that hasn't been solved, the water crisis. Even before the fighting began, there were already protests in various places like Khuzestan and Isfahan because of drought and water shortages. Now, it has gotten even worse because the millions of people who fled from Tehran and the southern areas flocked to the north. In provinces like Mazandaran and Gilan near the Caspian Sea, these places are also struggling because their resources are only enough for their own population. And now, the number of people has suddenly doubled or tripled. As a result, the administration can no longer cope. There's a shortage of water, food runs out quickly, and services are no longer enough for the population. Because of this, tension and conflict arise among the locals because they all lack the necessities to survive. In this situation, even if the fighting weakens or temporarily stops, there is still an important question of whether people can return to their former lives. Honestly, it's not that easy because returning is not just about reopening the roads. They need to have a home to return to, a job, and enough water. But around Tehran, a lot has already been destroyed, like factories, power supply, and communication systems. These are basic necessities for a city to function. Restoring electricity, water, and supply chains will take months and possibly years. And beyond the physical destruction, it's even harder to restore people's trust in the government. Because of what happened with the disappearance of the leader from the public, the lack of clear control, and the exposure of weaknesses in governance, the sense of security gradually disappeared. Even those who were once loyal to the regime are no longer confident. They would rather stay near the borders, even if it's uncertain, than return to the capital where there are obvious problems in governance. In the minds of many, it's better to face uncertainty than to stay in a place you know is chaotic. And this is where the true impact of the crisis can be seen. It's not just the destruction of buildings. It's not just the fall of the regime. It's the loss of people's trust in their own country when the number of those who left inside and outside Iran reached 10 million. This only means one thing. The state can no longer fulfill its basic duties. There is no longer enough security. There is no longer enough assistance. At this point, it's no longer realistic for Iran to handle the crisis using only its own resources. That's why they need help from outside. This is no longer an option, but a necessity that requires help from the international community, the United Nations, and neighboring countries. But there's a big problem because it's unclear how aid will get in, since the airspace is closed, the sea is dangerous, and the roads are targets of attacks. That's why Iran's connection to the outside world is almost cut off. Because of this, the most important routes now are the borders. One of the most critical is the border with Turkey. It stretches for around 560 kilometers on the western and northwestern side of Iran. And right now, this is one of the few remaining routes in and out of the country. The Kapakoy border crossing has become the busiest. Many Iranians who want to leave pass through here. This is also where aid could possibly come through. Because of the magnitude of the problem, Turkey has already prepared. According to their interior minister, they have prepared for 3 scenarios. First, try to control migration while they're still on the Iran side so that people don't arrive at the border all at once. Second, set up tent cities and buffer zones near the border so that those who left will have temporary shelter. Third, if people keep arriving, they're ready to settle them within their territory. This isn't new for Turkey. During the Syrian crisis, they accepted almost 4 million refugees. They became the largest host country in the world, so they already have experience and their management is well organized. They are capable of building tent cities, container housing, and temporary shelters quickly and efficiently. Their disaster agency, AFAD, has advanced logistics and is proven in various crises, such as war, earthquakes, and floods. The same goes for the Red Crescent, which has an efficient network to provide food, water, and medical aid. And now, all of these might be used again for Iran. But even with this kind of preparation, the situation is still not simple, because as aid arrives, the number of people in need continues to grow. And as time goes by, the crisis grows even bigger, not just for Iran, but for the entire region. But there is an important reminder from the past. It happened in Syria. Even though Turkey helped millions of refugees back then, they still feel the effects of it to this day. The nearly 4 million refugees they accepted left a deep impact on the economy, society, and politics. Tension arose. The public became sensitive to the issue of new arrivals. So now, even though Turkey is ready to help, they also have their limits. They want to help, but they also want to protect their own country. That's why their focus now is, as much as possible, to prevent too many people from coming to the border and to keep them on the Iran side for now, because they know how difficult it gets when the numbers grow too much. But it's not just about accepting refugees. There's another, even more critical question. How can humanitarian aid be brought into Iran? If a buffer zone can be established at the Turkish border, this could be the start of a humanitarian corridor. A route where aid such as food, medicine, blankets, and hygiene kits can pass through. From Turkey, these can be brought into northwestern Iran, especially in West Azerbaijan province, using the Gerbulak and Kapakoy border crossings. Turkey has an advantage here. In January, they built a long and sturdy border infrastructure that stretches for around 380 kilometers of concrete road. There are 203 optical towers and 43 observation towers. This can be used not only for security, but also for the proper entry and distribution of aid. That's why movement at the border will be organized and controlled. But there's a big problem because the area is dangerous, especially in Tabriz, which is about 200 kilometers from the border, and continues to be hit by attacks. It almost doesn't have any proper air defense left. That means there's no guarantee of safety for the aid convoys. Even humanitarian missions can still be hit. That's why clear coordination is needed. Not just Turkey, but also the US and Israel to ensure the safe entry of aid. Otherwise, the situation could get even worse. Now let's look at the other side. Azerbaijan has another possible route. Through the Astara border crossing, it can bring in food and medical supplies to provinces like Gilan and Ardabil. But this isn't easy either because there's tension in the relationship between Azerbaijan and Iran, especially after recent incidents. That's why the Azerbaijani army is now on full alert. This means that even if there's a possibility of help, there's also risk involved. Overall, the situation is clear because there are those who want to help, there are routes, and there are plans. But all of this depends on one thing: how safe every move is. Because in this kind of crisis, even helping comes with risks, and even if diplomatic talks are still open, the situation on the ground is still not getting any easier. Because the problem now is not just the decisions of the leaders, but the logistics themselves are failing. At the border crossings, one of the biggest problems is the congestion. Long lines of trucks that are barely moving. Since the war started, normal commercial traffic has almost come to a halt. But the problem is, humanitarian aid also has to pass through there, so only one route is being used, and this is the bottleneck. So if Turkey wants to send in aid, the aid trucks can't just join the normal flow. There needs to be a special system with separate lanes, a faster customs process, guaranteed security, and a clear plan that's suitable for a war zone. Without these, the aid will just get stuck and won't reach those in need. The same situation applies on the Azerbaijan side. The Astara crossing's already busy even on normal days, so it's going to be even more of a bottleneck now that there's a war. And for the aid trucks to get through, active coordination from the government of Azerbaijan is needed. But because of the tension in previous incidents, it's not that easy. If the war continues and the number of displaced people reaches 10 million, the border crossings won't be able to handle that many. And we already have an example of what will happen. During the Syrian crisis in Idlib, the borders also became a bottleneck. The result was hundreds of thousands of people got stuck, sleeping in the cold, lacking food, and without proper aid. And now Iran is heading toward the same situation, but it's worse because there are more people and the conditions are more complicated. At this point, it's clear that this is no longer just a simple humanitarian crisis, but a sign of a much deeper problem. The system that should be protecting the people is no longer working. The government that should be providing help can no longer do that. And the long lines at the border, the people waiting without any certainty, are not just images of suffering. This is evidence of a state that is slowly coming to a halt. People no longer see the capital as a place of protection. It is no longer a symbol of security. Instead, they now see it as a broken administration and a government that can no longer keep its own citizens safe. Because of this, people continue to leave. It's not just because they're afraid of bombs, but because they no longer trust that anyone will protect them. The millions of people now gathering at the borders of Turkey and Azerbaijan are no longer simply evacuating. This is now a major shift in the movement of the entire region. It's like an earthquake that's not only felt inside Iran, but also in neighboring countries. At this point, Iran's problem is no longer just about enemies from the outside. It's no longer just about external threats. This is now a fight to survive within its own country that's slowly collapsing. A place that's losing resources, losing control, and most of all, losing its people. Because when the citizens themselves choose to leave, that's the clearest sign that something is wrong. And now that's very clear. As time goes by, the government's moves become more and more limited. It's like a chess game where there are no moves left and there's no clear next step. And as this happens, the foundation of the entire system is slowly giving way, not because of a sudden event, but because of a combination of problems that have all exploded at the same time. And in the face of all this, a nation is slowly collapsing while the whole world watches.